Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. All day today, the big news has been the Modi government's attempt to replace governors appointed by the UPA. Is it justified in trying to do so? To what extent does the Supreme Court judgment of 2010 protect governors, and are the recalcitrant ones standing up for principle or just fighting for their own self-interest? My guests are Congress MP Manishankar Iyer, former BJP Minister from Gujarat Jai Narayan Vyas, the former Vice Chairman of the Law Commission KTS Tulsi, and the former Governor of Manipur, Mizoram and Jharkhand Ved Marwa. Gentlemen, before we come to the present situation, let's start with the law as laid down by the Supreme Court in 2010. First, the Supreme Court ruled that governors were not employees or servants of the centre and cannot be removed just because they are out of sync with the policies or ideology of the government, or because the government has lost confidence in them. But the critical point, Mr. Tulsi, is this doesn't mean governors can't be removed. It's just that there has to be good reason for doing so, and maybe the court may require you to disclose that reason in court as well. Would you agree with that position?
That's right. Yes, that's exactly the position. And the Supreme Court has said there have to be valid and compelling reasons for removing them. And also that the court can scrutinize the material and the basis on which the governors are sought to be removed.
But
therefore, the matter is subject to amenable to judicial review.
You are absolutely right when you say it's amenable to judicial review, but there is something else the Supreme Court said in 2010. It said the court will not interfere merely on the ground that a different view is possible, or that the material or reasons for removal are insufficient. In other words, the court seems to be very reluctant to interfere, even though it's reserved the right to do so. Would you agree with that as well, Mr. Tulsi?
Yes, that is correct. But you know, en masse removal, that means that for in each individual case has got to be scrutinized and valid reasons given. If en masse removal is taking place, that itself is an indication of mala fide, that it is being done for some extraneous reason.
All right. Jai Narayan Vyas, on the other hand, the Supreme Court in 2010 also said, and I'm quoting, it follows that a change in government at the centre is not a good ground for removal of governors holding office to make way for others favoured by the new government. You have to have other reasons for doing so. Would you accept that that makes it very difficult for you to simply remove governors because a new government has come in?
Well, Karan, I think the Honorable Apex Court has laid down the guidelines and have made it abundantly clear that the Apex Court will need to satisfy itself that there are cogent reasons for an individual case. I am in total agreement with what Mr. KTS Tulsi has said. I don't think anybody better than him could have opined on this very delicate and sensitive issue. And therefore, I think no government would ever try to do something which is not in line with the case law which has been prescribed by the Honorable Apex Court of the country. But you very rightly said that there are reasons where the courts will feel reluctant to interfere, and I am sure I would also try to go with Mr. Tulsi that en masse removal of governors would mean a mala fide to an extent, and this might in itself have its own consequences. I am sure the government in power, whenever the cases are being examined, in the first instance I have no knowledge that there is a plan to remove these governors en masse or ask for their resignations. I don't think that is the case. We are discussing a hypothetical case that should there be this kind of an event, this is the possibility that is looming large, and I think any government will have to take decision in wake of this.
Mr. Vyas, what you're saying is not just very important, some would say very reassuring, but there's a question in my mind. Are you speaking on your own personal behalf, or are you actually echoing the views of the BJP party and the government?
Well, Karan, let me tell you, I have simply said what is the provision of the law. As far as I am concerned, I am not neither the part of the government, nor I have any reason to take a brief on the part of the Bharatiya Janata Party. But what I understand is, from all the reports that are available in the media, that right now the government has only asked for when is the date of a particular governor in a particular state expiring. For example, Mr. Bharadwaj's date may be expiring soon, and others might have some time. So this is simply an information, and I think any new government that has come to power is entitled to have this information. I don't think that one should try to find a devil out of their action to collect the information on and review it. I think this is simply a review going on, and appropriate action, keeping in mind the appropriate policy and appropriate law in force, will be taken at appropriate time. So I don't think there is a reason for that debate. I think the reason the threat itself is not existing right now.
Manishankar Iyer, writing this year in May, after the election results had come out, Soli Sorabji, the former Attorney General, who won the 2010 Supreme Court case, had the following advice to give to present-day governors who the NDA may wish to replace. And this is what he said: it would be befitting and also expedient if they resigned rather than stuck to their gubernatorial chairs and tried their luck in the courts. How do you respond to that advice? Because what Soli Sorabji is saying, even though the Supreme Court has said that this could be a matter that's open to judicial review, nonetheless, in his judgment, the room for review is so limited and the reluctance of the court to get into this area so great that governors are best advised to resign rather than seek to go to court.
Perhaps he should have added this coda when he argued successfully the case before the Supreme Court. I mean, you know, these excellent lawyers who also have a political aspect to them, they argue the case in court, and then when they find that the judgment that has come in their favor doesn't quite go in the direction of their political preference, they bring in these codas. Yes, certainly every single governor must be asking himself the question, or herself the question, should we remain in office? And it is for each governor to respond to that question. What I do see from the summary I have of the Supreme Court judgment of May 2010 is that the Supreme Court ruled that the court can interfere if government fails to give cogent reasons for removing governors. Now, we've just been told that the government is not removing governors, it's trying to review the situation to find out who's going quickly and who is not. Now, this is absurd, because the government has the information, and if they don't have the information, then I'm more than willing to give them the names of all the governors who are due to finish their term in the course of 2014. If you want me to give it, I'll read it out to you.
No, you don't need to.
It does seem absurd.
You don't need to. Well, that was actually, I think you're being a little unfair, because the important point being made by Mr. Narayan Vyas was that in fact he agreed with Mr. Tulsi's interpretation, and in fact he all the further said that any en masse removal of governors would be clearly a violation of the Supreme Court, and he also said that the government would not breach the Supreme Court guidelines. So you're picking up on a very small point to be polemical, disregarding what I thought was the more important point he made.
I didn't know. He was the one who added it, so the one point on which I disagree with him, I thought it my duty to point out that I have the information if the government doesn't have it.
All right, that's a very good point. You're making more like a debating point than a substantive one, but a fair point nonetheless. I still want to stick to the issue of principle before I broaden it and talk about the present situation, Mr. Varma. You've been governor of Jharkhand, of Manipur and Mizoram. If you're appointed by one government, which then 4 years later loses the election, and the opposition to that government comes to power, would you as an individual feel a moral need to resign because the government that appointed you has been replaced by its opposition?
First, let me tell you that I served under both the governments, the NDA as well as the UPA. In answer to your question, the institution of governor has taken a lot of beating. The whole office of governor has been brought into disrepute by these repeated controversies. Now they are not resigning when the state government, when the central government has not asked but hinted that they should. I think it will be a new law, because so far, according to my information, till date that has not happened. That will be something entirely new.
Now, can I stop you? You're saying if they don't resign when the central government hints they should, that would be a new law.
That will be a new law.
So they should resign when they get a hint.
Yeah, you see, because what is the, let me say, what's the role of the governor? The founding fathers had 3-4 things in their mind. Number one, that as he should be protector of the constitution and ensure that the state government functions according to the constitution. 2, that he is a philosopher and guide of the state government. 3, he should be a link between the center and the state. And 4th, which is very important, that when there is a constitutional failure, he should be a continuity. He should provide the continuity in governance. Now, all that can't be performed if the very controversial people, active politicians who have been using Raj Bhavan as another place to play politics,
right,
are with controversial background with allegations of corruption are appointed as governors.
Can I ask you a question? Once again, a relevant, pertinent question about yourself. You said you served NDA, you served UPA. You also said that if a governor gets a hint, he should go.
Yeah.
I take it when UPA took over, you got no hint to go.
Not only no hint, I was given the additional charge of Bihar during the UPA government.
So you got a clear indication they wanted you to stay.
Yeah. And complete my term. There were not many months left for my tenure to end.
Let's then, gentlemen, broaden the discussion, move away from our understanding of the Supreme Court judgment of 2010, which in a sense lays down the legal basis, and come to the present situation. Mr. Tulsi, several of the governors appointed by the UPA are in fact former politicians. I'm talking of people like Sheila Dikshit, Margaret Alva, Shivraj Patil, J.B. Patnaik. All of them have been front-rank former politicians. Should they, because they are politicians, resign when the opposition takes over?
No, I don't think so, because the same argument was given to the Supreme Court in Mr. B.P. Singhal's case. It was argued in that case that the conflict of governors with national policy should be a ground for their removal. And the Supreme Court said that no, it cannot be the ground for removal. They said, well, he has to be a bridge, and if he is not in sync with the national policies, he can't be a bridge. That was also negatived by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said valid and compelling reasons, and gave examples, 3 examples of valid and compelling reasons.
Okay.
One is that mental and physical incapacity. The second was allegations of corruption, and third was conduct unbecoming of a governor. Those were said, those are the examples of valid reasons, and the examples, arguments which were repelled, now they can't become the grounds, because those arguments were tested, and the Constitution bench of the Supreme Court negatived them as valid grounds for removal. And therefore, merely because they were politicians, the new government also wants to bring in their own politicians. If that's been the convention in the country for the last 60 years, then they are the ones who have experience of managing the Constitution, and therefore all parties have been appointing politicians.
Well, let's not go into that, whether parties are right or wrong in appointing politicians. I take the main answer you're giving as the important one, which is just because governors are politicians doesn't mean they should be removed because the government has changed. In a sense, I take it, Mr. Jainarayan Vyas, once again you must agree with Mr. Tulsi, because in fact, when the BJP governors were removed in 2004, the UPA did it on the grounds that they were BJP politicians, and the BJP objected, just as Mr. Tulsi is objecting today. So I take it once again on that issue, whether governors who are politicians should be removed because they are politicians, you agree with Mr. Tulsi and not with my question.
Well, Karan, I would say that as far as legal position is concerned, even on this second issue, I agree with Mr. Tulsi. But I have some different view. I will like to extend what Mr. Ved Marwa was saying. You know, governor is not somebody's employee. This gubernatorial chair is much more than that. And if it becomes for any reason a matter of legal dispute, I think it is better for the governor in the overall interest of the dignity of the chair on the moral grounds, though legal provisions may support him, to quit. ultimately, if you say that they are politicians of stature and they are men of stature and their own grain in public life, I think they should bring honor to the chair rather than the chair bringing honor to them. And I don't think it will be proper for them if somebody is worth his salt. That day, ultimately you are responsible to the President, and the President of India, who is the constitutional head of the present government, works as per the advice of the Council of Ministers. So ultimately you have to have in sync with the present day government, or you will bring in lot of unnecessary frustrations, conflicts, which if I may
you're getting into terrible territory, Mr. Jain Vyas, because you're suddenly saying you have to be in sync with the government, and a moment ago you agreed with the Supreme Court saying that just because you're not in sync is no grounds for being removed. So you're tying yourself in knots. But let me move on to Mani Shankar Iyer and point this out. I want to quote to you, Mani Shankar Iyer, what Congress Party spokesperson PC Chacko said today. He said, Congress will take a decision whether the governors will resign or not. And that is, to my mind, a clear admission that not only were these political appointees appointed simply because they're congressmen, but Congress still controls them, even though Congress is not in power. That's a bizarre sort of admission by Mr. Chacko, isn't it? That Congress will take a decision whether these governors resign or not.
The fact of the matter is that many of these governors, perhaps all of them, were appointed before 2010, when the strictures or the limitations of the Supreme Court did not apply. And therefore, it is possible that in the current situation, which is unprecedented, because we have not had a change of government after the Supreme Court judgment before 2014. And in these circumstances, the Congress can certainly have a view on whether or not people whom it has appointed, that is the Congress government have appointed, should be advised to remain or not. But ultimately, the decision to remain or not remain will be that of the individual governor. I don't think the Congress party can impose its will, but it can certainly advise them one way or the other.
Now, one category of governor, Mr. Marwa, as I've been discussing at the moment, are people who were politicians, who left their political offices and went down and became governors. But there's another category of governors, and those are former government officials who were obviously appointed because they were close to the regime that appointed them. I'm talking of people like B.L. Joshi, Ashwini Kumar, Vanchu, M.K. Narayanan. They're former heads of the IB, CBI, the Special Protection Group, even a former NSA. Now, should people like that resign when the government that appointed them has been defeated and the opposition has taken over?
No, you've raised a very, very valid point. The very fact that such people have been appointed, it's absolutely against the recommendations, very sensible recommendations made by the Sarkaria Commission. And he was a former Supreme Court judge. And that clearly says that people of some eminence, whose reputation is there, that they won't play active politics and sitting in Raj Bhavan, they should be appointed. But when these so-called loyalists or people with very controversial background, whether they are civil servants, whether they are police officers, whether they are intelligence officers, are appointed, what message are we sending? That in the post of the governor, they will be pursuing the political agenda of the ruling party.
Can I stop you? Yeah. You're questioning the grounds on which they were appointed. I'm asking slightly differently. Given that such people are appointed because of loyalty to the government, but they're not politicians, should they resign when the government that appointed them goes?
No, I'm going further. I'm saying they should. I said all governors should resign when the government gives
all
them a hint.
All governors across the board.
No, I mean whomever they decide to give them a hint. But such officers who have been posted purely on the basis of so-called loyalty, personal security officer of a former prime minister and so on, these people should be sacked.
They should be sacked?
Yeah.
Not just resign, they should be sacked.
They should be sacked if they don't resign.
So in other words, just to put it bluntly, you're saying people like Ashwini Kumar and Vanchu should be sacked by the NDA government.
I'm not going into any names, but
that's what you're saying.
More than that.
Very quickly, Mr. Tulsi, there is of course another category, although we don't have too many examples of it at the moment at all, but that would be people who are clearly non-political personalities, who've been appointed to governor. And I want to have to make up examples to illustrate it. For instance, if someone like a Vikram Seth were to become a governor, or if an army chief or a navy chief on retirement, or a university professor, perhaps someone like an Amartya Sen were to become a governor, would it be incumbent on them to step aside when the government that appointed them fell and the opposition took over? Or because this new category is A, eminent, and B, totally non-political, can they safely continue?
Yes, I think that will be a stronger case for continuance, and there may be a lesser demand for their resignations or for removal. But I really think that this is a good opportunity for the nation to debate the issue of the kind of people who should get appointed as the governors. And there needs to be a consensus between the parties, and unless the parties agree, no healthy convention can emerge. And we need to have healthy conventions.
Okay.
Even if the convention has to be that all governors must resign, let there be a debate, let there be a discussion on bipartisan lines, and let parties decide that this is how we are going to appoint the governor and this is how we are going to remove them.
Okay.
There needs to be a larger consensus on this issue.
Manishankar, I want to now focus specifically and singularly on Sheila Dikshit, A, because she's in the news, and B, because her appointment was so decidedly controversial when it happened. She was appointed governor of Kerala just days, some would say just hours before the model code of conduct came into force. Secondly, her appointment was a flagrant violation of the Sarkaria guidelines, which clearly said that someone who's been active in politics in the very recent past must not be appointed a governor. That was a complete breach in the case of her appointment. Now, in her case, do you think she should resign, or do you believe she's right in digging in her heels, as television calls it?
My answer to your question, but I'll come to the reasons for that in a minute, is that it is entirely up to her to decide whether she wishes to resign or not in the light of the change of government. But she is far from the only person with a record of politics in the recent past to have been appointed. I mean, when I look at the list of those 4 or 5 governors in whose case Mr. Soli Sorabji went to court, there was Vishnukant Shastri, who was an MP with me in Parliament, Babu Parmanand, Kailashpati Mishra, and Kedarnath Sani, who was a Delhi politician. So, please do not attempt to imply that there was something improper about doing for Sheila Dikshit what had become a standard practice. Now, even with regard to the Sarkaria Commission criteria, it never said that somebody who has got something to do with politics should not be put in. What it said is, has not taken too great a part in politics generally and particularly
No,
in the recent past.
you can't make
But
up the Sarkaria Commission guidelines to suit yourself. Forgive me, I'm going to read them. You are making them up to suit yourself. This
You
is what
can
it
read
says.
them, I'm reading from them.
You're reading the wrong version.
I resent the suggestion
You're reading
that
the
I
wrong
have not
version.
read
This
it
is what it
correctly.
says. The person
I've
to be
got it
appointed
with
as
me,
a
number
governor
4.
must not have participated in active politics at least for some time before his appointment. Sheila Dikshit was in active politics 2 months before her appointment. She'd been chief minister
But
for
I'm
50
saying
years.
that. I'm accepting that. I'm saying that after the Sarkaria Commission recommendation of 1987, it has been the practice, even of the lot that has now come into power, to appoint people who have been in politics in the recent past. The Sarkaria Commission recommendations were not accepted. Now we have the Supreme Court's orders on the subject, and I think that the situation post 2010 has to be viewed in a different perspective.
Okay.
And in that different perspective, I do not see that any Supreme Court guideline has been violated in the case of Sheila Dikshit.
Let me put this to you. It's quite clear, Mr. Marwa, that many of the governors, in their quiet way without going public, are resisting the nudge or the hint or the wink to resign. Are they doing that because they are standing up for an issue of principle, or are they doing it because they want to protect their jobs and their personal self-interest?
No, there is no principle involved in this. And the governor is there for during the pleasure of the president. The constitution clearly lays that down. Whatever the interpretation,
So they're defending their self-interest.
they are, maybe they are doing something more. They are playing party politics, some of them, and they are still active politicians. You have referred to Chako's statement that, and I think that's very relevant. He has unconsciously admitted that these governors are their appointees. Let me give you my
Very quickly, go ahead.
yeah, my own example. A active politician came to me when there was governor of Manipur, and he told me that we have given you such big Raj Bhavan and all, at least do this minor job for me. I told him to get out of my office.
Very quickly again, Mr. Tulsi, before I go back quickly to Mr. Jayanarayan Vyas. BL Joshi has resigned. MK Narayan, it says, could resign tomorrow morning. Will that make it more difficult for the others to refuse to do so? Could there be a cascading effect?
I don't think so. You see, we need to understand that the term of these two gentlemen was about to expire in any case. So there is, they are happy to go a month or 2 months before they actually retire.
Okay.
But so therefore, the other people for whom it would constitute a stigma, they will be obliged to fight for their own honor.
All right. Very quickly.
And particularly when they...
I take your point very quickly because I've only got 30 seconds. Mr. Vyas, I want to question you on the statement being put out by sources of your own government. They're saying that if Sheila Dikshit doesn't voluntarily resign, you will post her to the northeast to humiliate her. Now, that seems to me to take a very strange view of the northeast. You seem to assume that a post to the northeast is humiliating. Is that not disrespect for the northeast when sources in your government phrase themselves in this rather sad way?
I think, Karan, nobody would buy this, that somebody who is appointed as a governor should be humiliated and forced to make a forced exit. On the contrary, Karan, we should have discussed also another issue, where the acting governors after completing or before completing have gone back to active politics and have become central ministers or have even fought elections. And a governor who has acting partisan has sent an entire government home. These are also examples.
I agree with you. Those are very relevant examples, slightly beyond our jurisdiction today, but one certainly we'll come back to one day. But I must applaud you once again for having taken a line that surprises me. It's very different to what your party sources are saying they would wish to see, and I applaud you for having taken that independent line. My thanks to my other guests for joining me as well, and we run right out of time there. So if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.